these TV and live and extra.
Great, we're live.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
Hey.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, hello there.
We do the intro.
Great, we're live.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone, and welcome to our online audiences out there. We'd like to just say, hi, I'm Rodney Kamarsi. I go by he, him pronouns, and I am the Senior Programs Manager at the Asian Arts Initiative. And on behalf of everyone at AI, we just want to thank everyone, especially the artists, for continuing on this online journey with us and sharing their work. Also, we just want to thank everyone that's helped bring this show together. Melissa, who's been doing a lot of background work. There it is. Okay, so everyone got unmuted or muted for a second.
Okay.
So we'll edit that out. For some people that don't know what the Asian Arts Initiative is, it's an organization that is there based in Philadelphia to advance racial equity and understanding, activates artists, youth, and their communities through creative practice and dialogue grounded in the diverse Asian American experience. Today's program will feature a roundtable discussion with artists from our online summer exhibition, Thank You, No Thank You. If you haven't already, please be sure to check out the link in this description box below or whenever you see it, right? So we just also wanted to, I wanted to plug another thing, especially during this time apart and stuff like that. I think one of the activities we've been a part of in the summer has been the census. So in Philadelphia, this is what we're calling the summer of census. And the importance of it right now is to really share that we're still here, we're striving communities, and to get through this resilience. I don't know if people know this, they do the census every 10 years. So during this time, we all really need to get counted in high numbers. So for our APIA folks also out there listening, please get counted, encourage your folks to get counted. Young people that were in college and are returning to wherever they are at, if they were here in Philadelphia before the pandemic hit or before we had to go into lockdown, you still count in Philadelphia, so tell your parents. But that was a quick plug, but we're gonna also have a town hall on Monday. All of the artists here are invited to also pitch an idea or kind of a show and tell. So if you have like a short video that you want to talk about with other artists, if you're looking for artists to collaborate with, please join us. It's the same time, but if you are willing to pitch, there's information on the website that we can link to you guys. And also anyone out there that's listening, please consider pitching or also just tuning in to see how the artists in Philadelphia are adapting and innovating in this time of quarantine and revolution, right? I didn't want to be too long, but that was a quick summary of what we're trying to do. Yeah, I just want to pass it to y'all. Have fun. I'm gonna go dark, but I'm gonna still be around listening. Please, cheers to y'all. One love. Catzie,
Cheers.
all you.
Thanks, Rodney. I like missed half the intro because all of a sudden my iTunes started playing Cambodian music, and I was like, "What?" So luckily nobody heard it, and I because I knew it was like I was the only one because everybody else was still listening, and I was like, "Is nobody else hearing this music?" So anyway, so my name is Catzie, and I am an artist, but also the founder of Last on the House, which is an organization that promotes storytelling in the Lao American refugee community. I'm based out of Philadelphia, and I curated the exhibition, Thank You, No Thank You, which in a very short way of describing it is a group show that is themed around the 45th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. And all the artists who are involved are either identify as Southeast Asian or refugee. And this talk today is part 2. And so I'm just going to get started. And so I am going to call your name, and you can introduce yourself, and you can introduce the piece that you have in the exhibition. And so since he was also here at the last talk, I'm going to pass it to Alex.
Hi, all. My name is Nguyen-Vo. I'm a painter, conceptual artist. My pieces in the show they're really long titles. I have annoyingly long titles, so I have to read it off. Vitman, soldier dismounts a French patrolman, and white officers waiting in the dark. They are pieces that are part of the they're sort of like critiques, not even critiques, observations of the continuum of post-colonialism via pleasure and power. I don't know what to say after that. I'm pretty sure I'll talk about it as we go along.
Okay, thanks, Alex.
Yeah.
Next, I'm going to pass it to Mooks.
Hello, friends. My name is Saymoukda Vongsay, and all the homies call me Mooks. It's what I'm known as on the streets, these streets of Minnesota. And I'm actually a writer by trade, but Catzie let me be an installation artist for a while, so that was fun. So I'm really glad that I got to be part of this. And I'm also a playwright. I'm currently the Andrew W. Mellon National Playwright in Residence at Theater Mu here in St. Paul. And what I made for the exhibit was initially going to be a series of altars, but I made one assembled Avenger altar, which is called the Unfulfilled Altars. And it's basically honoring our dead promises, dead stories, dead dreams. So thank you.
Thanks, Mooks. I'm going to pass it now to Sayon. Sayon.
Okay, it actually takes a few seconds to click that unmute button, huh? So hi everybody, I'm Sayon Syprasoeuth. I think my grandparents might have came from Laos, and then I was born in Cambodia on the border by Thailand. So I'm this mixture of I jump the border all the time kind of person. And even here in the community where I work at in Cambodia town in Long Beach, California, I still straddle most of the racial lineage, I guess. So my piece is this, I don't know, I guess the best way to describe it is this mobile piece. It's like it's something a baby would look at. Actually, it's right behind me, see? It's like right there, the pink one. I don't even know how to store the thing, so I just hang it because that's how it supports itself. But it was a way for me to like reflect in my identity and my history and all of that stuff. And I still do lay on the floor and look at it and like, why the hell did I make that piece, you know? So.
Cool. Thanks, Sayon. I'm just going in order in the way I see people in my grid. So the next person I see is Nguyen, or am I saying it right? Are you Nguyen? Are you Nguyen?
So I go by Nguyen. If you're Vietnamese, you can call me Nguyen. Slightly harder. So the pieces that I have in the show, I have 3 pieces, and they're all related to this comic that I've been working on for like 7 years or so. It's called The Golf, and it's a comic about a fictional Vietnamese American family based on my own. So the first piece, let's see, the first piece that is in the grid for the show's page, it's called Áo Tai Dung Nhiều Tầng, and it's a large it's a large ink painting that's based on a sewing pattern book that my mom brought to America when we immigrated. And the next piece is a drawing called Every Night's Sleepover. And that's a illustration of how my mother slept as a teenager every night in Vietnam before we came to the States, before I was born. And the third one is actually one of the comics. You can read it as a PDF on the website, and it's chapter 5, and it's all about the very common, the most common Vietnamese name, Nguyen, Nguyen. And it can be a first name or a last name, and in my case, it happens to be both of my first name and last name, but with a bunch of caveats because there are different accent marks and they mean totally different things.
Cool, thank you. And then next in my grid is my office mate, Lanica.
Hi, folks. I am Lanica Angpak. I am part-time office mate with Catzie. And I'm actually, by trade, a performing artist and like youth development specialist person for the city of Philadelphia. This is actually the first time, I don't know why Catzie trusted me to do this, but to be part of like an exhibit as a visual artist, I guess. And the piece that I have is entitled Vilayphonh 1. It's one of the first portraits that I took of my niece Kayla, that draws inspiration from the feelings I get when I see old photos of my mother in refugee camps like Khao Dang, and even in the 80s when they first came here as refugees. And it's an exploration of an archive project that I've been working on.
Thanks, Lanica. Next is, I've been calling you Aragna, but I just heard Melissa call you Arana. So let me know which is the right way to call you.
I usually say Aranya like lasagna. That's how I've been kind of like introducing myself. But yeah, so Aranya. Hi everyone. So my piece is called Amazing Fantasy 1 and 4, which one depicts my father, and then the other one is my little sister who had cerebral palsy. And so my interest is like basically in comic book field, like the myth of comic book and why I feel like that's a kind of like very American comic books. And so that's how I kind of identify with the myth. And then when I was kind of growing up, like as far as like being an artist, I looked up to all those artists. I didn't really know who Picasso was and all that stuff. So I identified with like Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, and all these other like amazing comic book artists. So that's, for me, I wanted to kind of recapture like my own family narrative, but through the comic book experience and how that kind of plays like different like identity, and kind of also using like, you know, different art languages like cubism and, you know, like abstract and all that stuff. So yeah. And then, you know, the idea kind of came about when I visited the temples of Cambodia and saw these reliefs, and you know, there's amazing like flatness within the sculpture or within this relief, and also there's like this sculpture appeal to it. So that's where I kind of draw the inspiration for making all these pieces.
Cool, thank you. And our last guest artist is Jenny.
Hi. So I'm a fiber artist and illustrator, based out in I was based out of Paris for the past 3 years, but for the interim I'm in California, the Bay Area, California, and I contributed 3 pieces. They're called Mercy, Beached, and Survival, and they're fiber sculptures mainly made with wool and organic cotton. These pieces basically tell the story of my parents, or my mom's side, their immigration over to the US. I was born here in the States, but I realized early on that my life wasn't really like all of the other kids that were also born here. And I grew up in a refugee family. So it took me a while to realize that it wasn't the average American family that you'd experience. So there was a lot of identity issues growing up. And through art, I was able to understand my past a lot more and express it and share it with others, so that they could also get an understanding of what their past is like in order to understand themselves better in the future.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for introducing yourselves, but also reintroducing your pieces to us, each other, and the audience. So my first question is going to be the same question that I asked the other artists as a first question, which is, how is everybody doing?
Oh, that's a good question. It's kind of crazy right now. It's I mean, with the pandemic going on, I'm supposed to be moving over to Dublin, and I have to fly during the pandemic, and it's just like, oh, what do I do? And I just had surgery 3 weeks ago, so it's like all these whammies going on at once.
Yeah.
I'm okay, don't worry. But yeah, it's trying times as an artist because you're so overwhelmed with all the negativity, and you're overwhelmed with the chaos that it's hard to create when there's that roadblock of emotional distress and that touch of despair as well.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to like, I guess, procrastinate. That's the word. And so for me, like, I when there's a deadline coming, I feel like that's sort of like my inspiration. But like, as you know, the deadline is approaching and the pandemic is happening, and you're sort of like, I don't know what to do because I want to stay still, but also I know like something is due and I have to like submit it, and like I'm not really sure what to do. And yeah, it's crazy how you know, like you would think that if everything shut down around you, that you would have more stillness to be able to concentrate and create. But it for some people, it gets really hard because there's nothing to go off of because everything's just not there.
Yeah, the inspiration.
Yeah.
The drive to find inspiration.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking recently, I might have posted something, but don't look at my Facebook, a while back, and I thought, I wonder if I offended anyone. You know, it's like I think there's a lot of hypersensitivity to what's going on because we're stuck at home, and we see a lot of things go through our Instagram or Facebook or just on the news. And I think for me, I have been feeling a little bit down, but you know, like many of the community worker on the ground, you just have to keep going, right? Especially if you're working with artists or people that really need you to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had some friends that posted something supporting Mook, you might like this, supporting Trump, okay? And I thought, fair. But you know, and I thought, you know, this is a really wonderful person, but and I thought I can't judge at least for me, as I can't judge a person for posting that out there. That's just like a small section of their lives, right? Because I think this person has a business and, you know, whatever they need to do, and I think this person gets them what they need. And so I wonder if I post things like that, and then folks might have get offended or maybe make a mark on me or something. But that's just a minor worry. I just thought that's what's going on in my head recently.
Mux, what about you? You're based in Minneapolis, which is the heart of where a lot of the protest. I mean, basically, it's where like the center of things kind of just happen abruptly.
Yeah. There are still demonstrations happening, and the memorial site, it's still alive with people and activity. And people are still making supply runs. There are people still putting up plywood, and we're now, and one of the wonderful things about the plywood going up on business windows was that people have created murals on them. And it's just been beautiful. Like the nights after, the mornings after the riots, after the precinct burned, which is good because fuck the police, fuck 12.
Hell yeah.
The morning after, people in the community came out and cleaned the streets. People brought their brooms and brushes and dustpans, garbage bags. So that was very beautiful to see. One of the things that has been difficult is I have been trying very hard to be patient and trying to call people in with love and empathy to talk to them about why Black Lives Matter. And I've discovered I don't have that in me anymore. And I'm deciding to just call out because I want to honor my sanity and I want to honor my emotional labor. And at this time, I would much rather have conversations and continue building and making change with people who are in step with me. And so that has been my thing lately. Because to me, the life of Black people is not up for debate. The humanity of people is not up for debate. So I completely just shut it down and I don't wanna. But what's been very heartwarming is seeing, and very hopeful is seeing everyday people like us, right? As artists, we're like creatively documenting what is happening and we're responding and we're creating access for people to talk about really hard things. And I think that's just what artists do during times like this, is we respond and we get people to talk about stuff that could be really hard to talk about. So, and I love every single piece that's part of this exhibit. And I really want to learn more about like what was the psychology behind those pieces. So that's really what I'm here for with my journals.
Great, that leads me to my next question, which is how each of you conceptualize the thought of celebrating the anniversary of a war or the end of a war. Because something that I guess I like the more I think about is, you know, things that we celebrate are birthdays and anniversaries and, you know, happy things. And so to celebrate the end of a war is like, you know, what are we, you're celebrating something terrible, sure, but is it something, you know, it's just kind of a weird juxtaposition, right? Like you're like, are you celebrating? Are you remembering? Are you just creating this reminder for yourself how bad it once was, or like how resilient we are, or, you know what I mean? So I guess the question for all of you is, you know, what are your thoughts in remembering, you know, the end of the Vietnam War?
I mean, I guess for me, it's like remembering is like also moving forward, you know, like, and then kind of documenting what that remembrance kind of mean. It's not like, maybe it's not honoring, but it's like where you kind of came from, you know, and out of that chaos, you know, you're like new, you know, because I always kind of think back to like my identity. If this war didn't happen, what would I be doing, you know? And I would always question that when I was a kid, and I never knew why. But as I got older, as an adult, it's like you realize that's how I got here. So it's like, I mean, and I'm here, and I'm not like disheveled, you know. I'm like, I went to school, I got educated, you know, like all these other things, and like, you know, it's like, so that's why I really love the title, Thank You, No Thank You, because it is like, yeah, man, like, thank you for doing what you did, but no thank you, because like my life would have been totally different, you know? So.
Like for me, I was born in California, so I wasn't a part of that journey from Vietnam or Southeast Asia to the new land, I guess. And my mom's family journeyed to Malaysia. They were at sea for 2 weeks. So to celebrate the end of the Vietnam War and to create these pieces was more like celebrating their ability to survive. And because of their ability to survive, I've been able to survive through whatever life has been like here, which is nothing compared to what they experienced in Vietnam during that time. But it is something else of a battleground per se. When you're growing up in the States as an Asian American who isn't quite American but isn't quite Asian per se, like I grew up in a Chinese Vietnamese family, but I wasn't American enough for my American friends, and I wasn't Chinese enough for the Chinese people. So it's kind of like, where do you belong? And that's what these pieces are really about. It's that I'm not the only one. There's loads of them. There's loads of people who have gone through this identity crisis as well. And yeah, that's what the end of the war is meant to me. It's understanding yourself even better and surviving and celebrating that ability to survive.
Yeah, just to piggyback off what Jenny said about like this, like not really fitting into this or that. Like, I remember I grew up in a predominantly white school district, and if there were Asian folks, there were East Asian folks, and I like the bullying started for me as like, oh, she's the wrong kind of Asian. Oh, she's a gorilla because she's kind of hairy and brown and like things like that. And it's like I used humor a lot to deal with that, and then to be able to become an adult and like realize like who I am and how wrong it was for me to have like internalized those things, but then also realizing that like I, even if being an artist may not have been my family's first choice for me, it's a choice that I'm able to take because we were, you know, like they were able to survive, and culture as we knew it in Cambodia almost totally disappeared. Any type of arts or even education almost completely disappeared. So for me to have been able to go to college, to be a successful performing artist, and like to just do whatever I want to do is really a daily celebration of the end of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree.
The Vietnam War to me, like I always felt for myself that it was a constellation in time, and that, and more so that it's a lens now that I see the world. Like, and so what Jenny said about how she used art to explore and to break things down, to exploring the Vietnam War through art since I was an undergraduate or when I was 18 years old. Actually, it made the world more complex as I explored the Vietnam War as an artist and saw the different facets of and perspectives, and also the reasons and the post-colonial aspects of it in Western imperialism that's involved with it, and the contradictions of the United States involvement in the Vietnam War. And so these things really inform me as an artist. It really made the world more complex, actually. And so when I think of the Vietnam War, I think of it as just a really complex lens I see the world.
Thanks, Alex.
Because things aren't black and white.
Yeah. You see a lot of grays. There's a lot of different grays out now.
Yeah, a lot of gray.
Something that I noticed, that I have been noticing ever since I guess I embraced this identity as a refugee, but also like as a refugee of the Vietnam War, is this idea of lost narratives, you know? So like when people think of the Vietnam War, they think of only two kinds of people, the Vietnamese people and then like American soldiers who are involved. And so like a lot of times the Hmong, the Lao, the Cambodian stories are lost because their names or their countries aren't in like the title. And so a lot of times, you know, like I sometimes I'm watching these documentaries or like participating in these shows and like waiting for the chance for somebody to give a shout out to Laos, or, you know, like to mention other people. And so a question that I have, I guess, for everyone is, you know, how do you resolve that? You know, so if you're Vietnamese, do you remind everybody that it wasn't just Vietnamese, you know, and if you're of the other groups, you know, do you remind people that, okay, it wasn't just about, you know, American soldiers or, you know, whatever. And, you know, when do you interject yourself in the conversation to say, like, don't forget these people?
So yeah, I think part of my artwork, the figment imagination, was about reflecting and being able to contemplate what happened personally for myself as a personal story, and then also for my family, but then to bring it out into the other community, like the Vietnamese, and then the vets, right? The I guess mostly white people at the time when they were going over there into the war. They were like in their teens and early 20s. And then when they came back, and I did a small project on this, and I was taking a lot of these, when they have a sign, Vietnam vet, give me some money or please donate. Well, I stopped and I asked them to go to lunch. Well, many of them were psychologically damaged too. And they'll look at me and they're like, okay, well, here's a guy taking me to lunch at whatever the hell, he's going to give me food. And I talk with them. And yes, it was a little bit intense because they were a little bit unpredictable with their behavior. But to me, in remembering the war and what happened, working with the community on the ground, it's just so sad to me that so much spiritual and psychological and physically damaged people are still today. And so the progress has not, to me, that I've seen, has not moved forward much at all. So.
I mean, I would say like, it's war. So it's like, you drop a bomb and like everyone's like kind of disintegrated, right? And now we're all picking the pieces back together. And how do we patch ourselves back together? And so that's where like kind of the new narrative kind of comes from is, I mean, I'm Cambodian American and I was born in Cambodia, but Cambodians that was prior to me don't really identify me as Cambodian, and then white America doesn't identify me as American. So it's like, how do we negotiate between who I am? And it's like, I realize I'm like hybrid, like I'm a hybrid of all these pieces, and I'm trying to pick up the pieces and tell them through an American and a Cambodian narrative, which fusing all these different like mythologies, I guess, to kind of like at least project like, this is who I am and this is what I'm about, like, and just using these iconic tropes to kind of identify with, the masses or the viewer to kind of see me for that. This is what I'm doing.
I think this exhibit is the first time that I've been grouped in this way with other Southeast Asian artists. So to be included with Cambodians and Laotians and my Vietnamese American colleagues, I think that is so special. And now that we're reflecting on it, I'm realizing that that is so rare. And when you're a kid, like, I don't know, I'm going to assume at least some of you guys were raised in cities that there were no other Asians or a very tiny percentage. So it really did feel like whether you're Laotian or Cambodian, like you're like the only Asian. So that experience, I hope that we all can identify that feeling of isolation. When you're a kid, you can't really process it, and only now, I'm 39 years old. Only now am I starting to kind of really make sense of it, and these identity issues are starting to make sense of it. And only now do I feel like, well, only now are my parents comfortable enough to even talk about the war. And so these stories are still coming to the surface. This is still happening as we're talking right now. I love that, just a couple weeks ago, like I heard a story that my mother never told me before. Like, what? This is amazing. This is a part of my history that, you never shared with us before. And now you're feeling comfortable. So how many of those stories are out there?
Yeah, precisely.
What's the story?
We lived in outside of New Orleans when in the first couple of years we were in America, and my mom was talking about saving up, going to thrift stores, going to yard sales every week, and slowly getting enough silverware and home furnishings so that we could, when we saved enough money to move into our first rental apartment. that we would have enough to start a life together.
My mom was actually saying something similar when we were passing by the thrift store over in our neighborhood. That's about to close down, unfortunately, after 45 years. She's like, we used to get the books from there and the clothes and the housewares, and we still have some of that stuff, but oh, it's gonna be sad that they're gonna be closing down. I'm like, yeah, where am I gonna go shopping when I come back? But yeah, it's a part of my life too. To piggyback off of Nguyen's story, I'm Chutiao American, which is a Chinese minority, and you don't really hear of it very often. But our people tend to be kind of like chameleons, and we blend in a lot with other communities. I blend in easily with the Chinese and the Vietnamese community because of my background. But we're everywhere. I mean, there's a huge Chutiao population in Paris. There's a big population in Philadelphia that I know of, and over here on the West Coast, in the Bay Area as well as LA. So, but people don't know about us because it's a rare language and not a lot of people speak it. We're diasporic, so we're found all over the world. Singapore, there's more of us outside of Chutiao than there is in Chutiao. So to be able to choose to be an artist, a Chutiao artist, is very rare. There's not a lot of us out there. If there is, they're in the performing arts in Chutiao opera, or they're in Chutiao puppetry. There's like a puppetry school for Chutiao people in Singapore, or they're into woodworking and pottery. Like those were the traditional crafts that came out of Chutiao. But in terms of illustration or fiber arts, I haven't found anyone. So to be able to bring that back to a group of people who had to find livelihoods in other cultures and in other identities and in other parts of the world and blend right in, it's an amazing ability to choose to do that. Just like how the rest of you guys have been able to choose to be artists, to express yourselves and your backgrounds in your culture.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's just to piggyback off of Wing's thing there.
And to just kind of go back to the first question that you asked, Catzie, like, how are you or whatever, I feel like we're just kind of adapting to the times that we live in, and you know, being whoever we are, you know, Asian American or whatever, it's like we're always adaptable, you know, we're adapting to our environment, and I feel like that's, even to this time, we're adapting to it. And that's kind of like the field that I work in. You know, I work with adults with disabilities, so like I kind of make these things for them to adapt into their environment. So it's like we're just adapting, I guess.
Yeah. I want to address your question about the association with the Vietnam War with Laotians and Cambodians who were very intrinsically part of that war but are erased from the history of it.
Yeah.
Having grown up with Cambodian families and skateboarding with their sons, we've always felt affinity with each other because we're Southeast Asian, but in terms of thinking about the narrative of the war, it never occurred to me until I started actually exploring it as an artist. I mean, this is 12 years ago now, but as I explored the art, I realized the proximity, not even the proximity, but the shared nature of our people. It really shocked me that we continually do not acknowledge the atrocities of the Cambodian people and the Laotian people in that war, which is horrific, which is very much part of Western imperialism, like our byproduct of it. And so that out of the critique, that's being removed out of the academic critique is really, is wrong. And for you to have a show with all of us here is actually a right step into that critique. And I think this is really big. This is really big, yo, for real. This is good.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah.
I wanted to, I guess, call back to what Lanica and Mooks were saying in their introduction. When you guys were saying, like, I'm not traditionally a visual artist. Something that I guess like happened in like this conversation about Black Lives Matter and like people who normally aren't political or like do not post things like this all of a sudden becoming part of the conversation or posting Black on their Instagram socials or like, you know, whatever. And sort of like the reaction of some people who I guess have been doing the work for a long time being upset that, you know, you're not doing enough, or like you are now just joining the conversation. Like I found myself being part of those people. But then like something that someone had said to me recently was this idea of like lording yourself, because you know, you were able to go to a college that had APIA studies or like African American studies, or that you work in an environment that, you know, provided bias training, and like you're, you know, like these kinds of things you are able to recognize because of the work you constantly do, and that like some people did not. And for them, you know, like 2020 was their entry into this thought. And so I shouldn't you know, be upset that it took them this long to join. And so that's something that I have been trying to check myself with, you know, when people are trying, and like I like me not getting mad that they're not at the level that I am. And just remembering like, yeah, like a lot of the people that I grew up with didn't make it past high school. A lot of the people that, you know, are in the community that I am from, never got to be part of any experience that I was, you know, as an artist, as like someone who's been able to like travel to different colleges and universities and have these conversations, these intellectual academic conversations, and like to be able to, you know, recognize these terms and say it in a useful way. And so I have been finding that I have to remember that I have privilege myself, and that, you know, as people are new to whatever field they're introducing themselves, like to just let them be. And so, you know, Lanica and Mooks, I have no problem with you being in my show, obviously. And, you know, I don't hold it against you guys. And, you know, this is your like first work. So, but of course, I mean, I love your piece. I mean, I love all of your pieces. Obviously, I picked you, but like Mooks, like I loved, you know, your submission to create these unfulfilled promises, you know, for altars. And so I think like that's something that, regardless of whether the theme of the show was Vietnam War or something else, like I think that a lot of people can, you know, see themselves in terms of like, oh, like something I had a goal or dream for myself and I didn't do it, or, you know, like my parents had this vision of the future and this is not it. And so I think like that for me was what drew me to your proposal, even though like it wasn't like fully fleshed out. So yeah. And I think too, like Lanica, like your piece, like you have this very cheerful picture of your niece. And I think a lot of times when people, you know, do these projects that are based on the Vietnam War, they're, you know, they're looking for trauma or like something painful. And for me, like seeing your niece in a field of flowers was like, oh, that's so delightful. Like I would want this in my show. I don't need things to be, you know, so explicit, you know? So I don't have a question. I'm just talking. So feel free to jump in. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said yeah.
You just touched upon something that I've been thinking a lot about, and you said the word privilege, and I was thinking a lot what the word, you know, we know what white privilege is, but what is Asian privilege? And I was recently, and then as soon as you said, I realized perhaps Asian privilege is the ability to remain silent, and then no one will call us out, and no one will see us, and so we can do a lot of work underneath. You know, they just want to for us to continue working, and so that's something I'm trying to resolve myself, because I'm an introvert naturally. So on top of just my Asian privilege of being silent and then my introversion, like how do I assuaged? How do I fix those things? And these are things I'm trying to work through. I like, so I don't know. What my question to y'all is like, what is Asian privilege, and how can we leverage that privilege to help the Black Lives Matter movement during these revolutionary times?
Oh, I want to answer. Me. Uh, I started thinking back. When we came over to this country as refugees, I was like, I don't know, 7. I don't even know how old I am really. But we were just not educated at the time and aware of what was happening. And just fast forward to now, I got educated. I understand the various lens of trauma, people that are in poverty, economic poverty, systematic poverty. But now when you're talking to a homie from the hood or somebody from the east side here in Long Beach, which has $1 million home and able to navigate those area, to me, I feel like, I have my man bun. Sometimes I let my hair down. I look like a wild Samoan person, and folks be walking away from me. And I see, the fear or just these nuances. And I say to myself, it's like, wow, Sayon, you know how to deal with certain people, and you know how to navigate. I mean, people want to beat me up in the hood. If they throw bottles and things at me because, I wear maybe beanies or whatever, and they think I'm from a different gang. But just to be able to understand and see where these folks are coming from, wherever they're at, to me, I think that's a privilege. And yeah.
I think that's a double-edged sword, right? The invisibility of Asian Americans.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're not often part of public discourse when it comes to racism and equity and justice.
Right.
And so it's like what Alex said, we can be in the background and do that work, but at the same time, when we are affected, our stories are not often told. And so that's like a big struggle, right? Ever since 45, fuck him too, ever since 45 started referring to COVID as what did he say? A Chinese flu, a Kung flu, right? There have been over 800 reported cases of violence against Asian Americans. Yep. And I'm still not hearing
that dialogue. Yeah.
Where's Kim Kardashian? Why isn't she like on our side? Why is she not amplifying this? Right? So it's like, it's very frustrating and I don't know what to do.
I think with what Alex touched on regarding the silent privilege, I think Asians were always seen as the model minority, as the news has been using it. I think the benefit that we have in that silence is to be able to do something underneath it all. I was feeling at the beginning of everything that I wasn't doing enough to help with the Black Lives Matter movement and with any type of injustice outside of being stuck at home and writing stuff on social media. But what I realized is now is a good time to use that prowess, to use that strategy, to use that ability we have to network and communicate with not just our families and friends, but to teach and to enable people through our work and to inspire them through our work to make a difference in everyone's lives. And so I've gone a bit more introverted, but I've also become a lot more focused about what I'm trying to do with my work and what I'm trying to say. Instead of blasting out something every day or every 2 days, it's just once in a while, but it's a meaningful once in a while. And there's content to it. It's not just static that's out there with all this other talk. Not to what's the word called? Dilute. Yeah, not to dilute what everyone else is saying, but I think when it is time for us to say something, it should be powerful and meaningful, and it should take that silence as a command and say, this is what we have to say. This is what we're saying now. We might be quiet all the time, but we have to find that message, that focus, to really double down on. And I think that's where that power is going to come from when the Asian community is ready.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, just to piggyback off of that, it's like we're, as an artist or as a painter, a sculptor or a writer, it's like we're all about like image and the physicality of it. As an image maker, like what are we thinking that is like to put out into the world that's going to be impactful, like, so every time that I'm hearing all this thing, it's like you're soaking it all in, and I'm kind of conceptualizing what the ideal image could be, and maybe that's like being just like a minority. It's like that's what you're doing. You're just kind of soaking in what the outer shell is, and then hopefully when you speak like truth, and hopefully when we do come up with these images, hopefully that's our truth that's reflecting out into the world,
And I think
makes me want to ask the question. I'm sorry, Lanica. You go first.
Okay. Just really quickly, just like the idea of like Asian privilege. I think for the last few weeks have been sort of like wrestling with this idea of allyship and being an accomplice, and understanding that like Asian privilege is having the ability to be an accomplice as in like not just focusing on the individual support or anything like that, but the structural dismantling of injustice. And like knowing that like there are a lot of Asian American folks who hold power, like decision-making power in these larger structures, and that we like that's part of our privilege, right? Like this like proximity to whiteness and like proximity to whatever like American whiteness and that power holds, and like how do we as accomplices decide when to make those changes? And it's not always outright like I'm going to post onto social media, but like it's really just like what are those moves that you're making that are chipping away at the iceberg?
So I think, Jenny, when you talk about the silent, I don't know how you word it, but when I see protesters out there with, say, Khmer for Black Lives Matter with their signs, and other Lao Asian or, just community that's normally silent is being visible now. And I think it's really powerful. And I hope the Black community sees that, and everyone else sees that as well, as an alliance and support for them. Because I think way back when, we are like on a survivor mode when we came to this country, and we were like, okay, pay attention to those people instead, and don't pick on me. But now I think we really have to come to support. And the last Black Lives Movement, I don't think they really got that much attraction as it should have. But I mean, this time, I hope something significant happens. And then the only way I think it's going to move forward is with people like artists like us and the rest of the community really systematically change things.
I want to go back to what Mux was saying about like it being a double-edged sword, and like, being able to do the work and not being not being part of the conversation. For a long time, many of us have been doing the work, and like it's gotten to the point where like we're just like really tired of carrying the load. And like I know that when pandemic hit, but I was just like tired, you know what I mean? Like I was just like, I don't feel like trying to ask people for money that I should be getting anyway. I don't feel like, leading a workshop, because I would like to take a break. And so I wonder if any of you have ever felt that way, and like, do you have a guilt? Do you have a guilt because, like now is the time, and like, the community really needs you, and like this is not the time to like take a break and whatever. But for me, I just felt like, I don't know, like the pandemic just kind of just made me realize like, okay, like I haven't spent enough time with my family, or like my dad passed away and I haven't spent enough time talking to my parents about like whatever. And so there's a part of me that feels like, okay, good, this is like, the pandemic is a really good excuse not to do anything, and I don't feel like doing anything. But like every single day there's like a new grant that I still have to prove why I should deserve this money, or like, you know, there's services for the community and they need a Lao interpreter, and for some reason still my contact is at the top of the list, even though we are an arts organization. And so there's a part of me that just wants to be like, I don't want to be bothered. I'm sorry. Like, I don't feel like creating art, even though that's what you expect of me. Like, I don't want to do anything. So I wonder if any of you have ever had those thoughts as well, especially now when like things are happening and people look to you to be the leaders or the inspiration, and you just want to be like, can I just take a break? Can you not talk to me, or can you not ask me, or can you go ask somebody else, or can you please carry the load for once?
Yeah, I think it's good to recognize our capacity and when we need to take a break. Like they said, you can't pour from an empty cup. And then the other thing to also recognize is that our Black siblings have been carrying this load longer than we have. And this is not to play not Special Olympics, Oppression Olympics, right? Because as former refugees, there's trauma in our DNA too, that we have to grapple with on top of doing this work and other things. And then, you know, taking care of our families and taking care of our community and paying attention to our creative work. But this is gonna be a long game, and we have to be able to take care of and honor our bodies and what we're capable of, so that we can be there for the long haul.
I started feeling exhausted. I mean, we're coming out of the Obama years. I was like high on art, just making art. And the second year, the start of the second year, 2017, well, the actual start of Trump's first year, is whenever I started realizing, I don't think I give a fuck about art, making art as much anymore. I still love art. I still want to make, I have desires to, but my body and my mind and my heart tells me, no, you should probably just sit back and be a witness to what's happening, to what's happening around you. Because I can only imagine that the feeling I have approximates when my family probably felt like they were under siege in South Vietnam by the communists. And so, and maybe we're not at a physical war, but we're at a cultural war right now, and I feel it deeply, and it really affects my art making, because I feel like we're so entrenched in it, and we're all kind of we're creative, so we're at the front lines of the culture war. And so because of that, I've been thinking a lot about that and how I can contribute without having to make, how can I contribute my creativity without having to make a physical object that a curator has to come and see it to validate me, or a gallery has to be in a blue chip gallery in New York to validate me. So that's something I'm really struggling with. So I feel you on the exhaustion, because I feel really exhausted. Painting is the last thing on my mind. When I pick up a brush, I already feel tired. I'm like, I'm tired. Like, I've already absorbed so much today, the news and just the events happening around you, especially in the past 3 months. It's crazy.
For me, with all that's going on, I think it's been really important to keep in mind balance of everything. Balance between the despair, the bad news, the good news, the pandemic and everything. It's been really stressful. I'm sure all you guys can relate. But I found that if I try to do something I've always wanted to do, now that I have somewhat the time to do it, it kind of brings me a little bit of joy. Like, I've always wanted to do leatherworking, but I never had the time. Now I kind of had the time. So I started doing leatherworking, just letting my curiosity lead me instead of social media. It's easy to get overwhelmed by the negativity and the bad news, and we know it's going to be there. I mean, it's been mounting for 3 years, sometime now.
Yeah, but it's hard, but it's hard when it's happening to your friends, you know.
Yes.
It's not that it's bad news, it's that the news is happening to your friends. And so that's the difficulty of what you're talking about. What you're saying is right, but at the same time, it's not just the news. I don't think you can't just shut off your life, because what's happening right now is extremely systemically fucked up.
Yeah.
And I mean, Dylan Roof, man, you know what I'm saying? Like, that happened, like, what, 3 years ago? 4 years ago now? Like, that still happened every year, so forth. Like, turning out the news is not going to stop that. Like, it's not going to stop that.
But it's not to say that these things aren't happening. It's to say that at some point we do have to prioritize our health, not to tune out the rest of the world or to ignore what's happening around us. But if we can't take care of ourselves, we can't keep on with our mission of what we were trying to do. And if we're in lousy conditions and our bodies are failing and all that stuff, then we don't get as much time. We're not going to be playing that long run, like Mooks was saying. And I think that's the important part, is being able to know when we can't do something and being okay with it and not feeling guilty for it as much as we want to. We want to make a difference, and we want to change the world, and we want to help everyone we can. But at the same time, we have to remember to help ourselves. And I think that's the key, is to remember to help yourself.
Definitely.
As someone who's a writer, I want to change that language a little bit. Instead of saying to ourselves, I can't do this right now, we have to say, this is what I'm able to do right now to help. Right? And that could be like what Alex says, is bearing witness, to be a witness, right? Or to do leather work, because that joy needs to happen. And, you know, so I think let's switch that language and say, what can I do right now?
It's good.
I think also, you know, I really agree about the being able to take a pulse of your mental and physical state where you're at, but also at the same time, you know, there's been all these arts initiative things going out there and supporting artists under the COVID, but heck, I mean, I'm fortunate enough I didn't have to apply for any of it, but at the same time, for folks out there watching, you know, if you're asking artists to do something, you better pay them, you know, find some money and pay them. And artists, you have to start asking them, is there fun available? You know, it's like, I am tired of making things for free. You know, it took me 3 years ago to finally say, to ask for money. It's like, you know what, this is gonna take material from me, my time.
Only 2 years ago?
when I really started to say, you know what, okay, my time is value and my talent has value now. And honestly, there because especially people think you're visible and you're doing things, they think you're loaded or something. But so ask for money and provide money if you have it.
Give me the money. That's like the biggest thing that I always want to say, especially as someone who like my performing arts is my classical dance, and everyone's like, it's so exotic and it's so beautiful, and you want me to pay $300 for 3 dancers for an 8-minute song? It's like, yeah, because it took us 15 years to figure this shit out on our own. You know, like this isn't like 8 minutes of like magically we know how to do the dance, but this is like 15 years of like building, like planting the seed and hoping and praying that it grows, you know, and like still praying, like even though I'm considered a master or a professional, like this shit still needs to be tended. And it like that exhaustion of like being an artist during a pandemic and like being an Asian American and being an ally and accomplice to the Black Lives Matter movement. And a lot of my work for the past 10 years has been on youth development and working directly with young people, like and outside of arts, like literally spent 7 years teaching young people about institutional racism and like what that is in the after school program. And my exhaustion feels very real to me. And I constantly have to validate myself for it. Or like call my sister crying because like I'm tired and I don't know what to do. Or like I don't know if I should feel this way or things like that. And the exhaustion is so real, but I'm so rejuvenated. It's so weird to be like exhausted, but rejuvenated because the young people I worked with 10 years ago had their own movements, right? Like I'm seeing all these young people just churning out so much change and like leading petitions and leading causes and knowing that like that little seed I planted, whether it was for dance or it's for justice or whatever it might be, like those things are being tended and they're growing. And like I might have left the garden for a week, but they're still there, you know, like it rained and I didn't have to water the garden yesterday or to like literally today I didn't have to water my bitter melons because it rained, you know, like just knowing that like my garden's still going to be there in a week. And allowing myself to feel both the grief of like exhaustion and guilt, but also like to feel rejuvenated and excited about being in this world where like I don't necessarily have to lead anymore, right? Like maybe I just follow someone else's lead now.
I just made some pie, and I'm waiting to eat it. And I'm not saying like this should be over. I just wanted to mention it. But I'm just curious about what you all are eating, since, you know, also Lanica just mentioned the garden. Something that happened, I guess, a lot during pandemic was people were discovering like they can cook, or like they can make little with, or they can make so much with so little. And like for me, I was just like, okay, like we are children of refugees, like we know this game. And so I'm just curious for any of you guys, you know, while the supermarkets were closed, or while you were asked not to go anywhere, or like, you know, what kind of things have you been eating in your homes while you're taking care of yourselves and others?
So I've been very, very lucky. Both my wife and I have been very, very lucky, because my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law were sheltering in place with us for the past 3.5 months. And I mean, it was like a 5-star hotel in terms of the food. And my mother-in-law is from the central highlands of Vietnam, so it's a different cuisine than I grew up with. My parents are from Saigon, so it was slightly exotic, slightly different, skewed flavors than what I'm used to. But we're talking a soup dish, we're talking a main course, maybe a little dessert. I mean, it's just like out of control. And so now I'm having withdrawal because they went back to California, and now we got to cook again. But we're doing okay. I made curry last night and melon soup a couple nights before. We keep very, very good recipes of both of our mothers, my wife's mother and my mother, and so I've been trying to really thoroughly learn all of my mother's recipes.
For us, we've been eating so we have like a true refugee family who just came to America and likes to stockpile on food. We have like 2 refrigerators, and the freezers are full of frozen meats and pork and fish and everything. So I was like, man, the best place to be a shelter in place is at my parents, because we don't have to worry about not having enough food. So it's mostly been rice with like fish or some cooked crab, a lot of fish. My family's from the south of Vietnam as well, and dad's from the Kinh Nhang area, and my mom's from Saigon, and so they're heavy fish eaters, and we have lots of fish at home.
I'm really fortunate with where I live in South Philly, because I'm on 4th Street, and 7th Street is where a big Southeast Asian, especially Khmer and Lao community is. So even if the stores might not have been open, the aunties were still cooking platters and things. So I have not necessarily been cooking a lot, because if my mom's not dropping off slamachukrung, I can like call an auntie and be like, do you have like, what soup are you making today? And like now that the shops are open, like they've got their platters, their kids are putting them on Instagram, like just like that little community that's only like 3 blocks away has been a lifesaver.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say I don't really cook. My wife doesn't really cook. She's Hispanic, but as we talk about privilege, I DoorDash pretty much like once in a while. So like that has been kind of helpful. And then, I know how to make rice. Luckily, my mom taught me that. It's pretty easy. You just press a button and then just, like eggs. This is your basic.
Did you say press 1?
What? Press 1?
Is that what you said? You said press 1?
No, you just press a button, cook, rice cook. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, to go back to like just the notion of being privileged here, you could DoorDash. I mean, I think that's, or, Grubhub and stuff like that. So
I've been really well acquainted with my one pot recently. Was getting dust until the COVID. And I live alone. I've been quarantined and isolated. I might be a little crazy now. I don't know. But yeah, just slow cooking pork, fish, chicken, anything that can really fit in it, and rice. And I was thinking about in just how recently the neoliberals and the white liberals and the white centrists there's a certain there's a sort of awakening in their minds that racism exists all of a sudden, and Taylor coming back to Lanica's and Sayon's like sentiment of getting paid. I think now is the time to really reach out to our networks, which is what part of our Asian privilege is, that we can kind of assimilate and move into different groups. We should start actually trying to move some white money around, whether to fund our own projects or fund larger projects or community projects. I think it's almost an imperative now. I've been really thinking a lot about that, to take advantage of just the white awakening that's happening right now. And
White guilt is happening, yes. So start applying for it, and they'll be dumping money at you. But
yeah.
So as far as food goes, I started making tam som. I made a papaya salad. I made so now I have gone into like using carrot, cucumber, and I was like, oh my God, how simple recipe is this, you know? And I was like, I had no idea, because I was just like stuck with papaya salad again and again. So
I've been making my own dressing. It just, I don't know, it's like a weird thing. Like, I guess dressing for me was always like this thing you get at the store and then you like save it until you use all of it. But like, I don't know about you guys, but I never use all of it. Like I use it once or twice and then it stays in the refrigerator until it's like expired. And so, like making my own dressing has been like really fun. And I feel like why the hell don't I make it more often? Like this is so good. Like everything that I think that I can't make, I can. But something that I've been thinking about too, quarantine, is like thinking of the ancestors and like, when they were under quarantine, and maybe it wasn't called quarantine, maybe it was called curfew. And, like the idea of like being told that you can't go outside or go past this point or go, out after this, but like you have needs and are like, I have no protein in the house, or like we have no cleaning supplies. Like, what are we supposed to do? And so there was a part of me that thought about them and, the things that they probably thought about. And like, if they felt like they were breaking the rules or breaking the law to like go out and, like I hear these stories all the time about people who would sneak out of refugee camps to go gather herbs or something, because as Southeast Asians, these things are all around and they can recognize it and they can just go out and get it. But like if they're staying in the refugee camp, you get like a bowl of rice and fish for your family and that's it, and there's no flavoring, and you're like can I, like, after the truck guy leaves, can I like go out and get me some mint and cilantro and whatever's growing to like make it better? Like, I have access to it. And so I thought about that too a lot during quarantine and cooking and stuff. I didn't really jump on the banana bread craze, but I definitely, like looked through the freezer and like finally understood why my parents have 2 fridges and a big freezer. And so, and it made me think of them and being like, okay, I don't have to check on them because I know they have like 6 months supply of beef. And so, they can probably, do whatever. But also thinking about, like when they first got here and, thinking about, like what grocery stores they could go to, or like how they were going to buy things. And if they couldn't read English, like how did they know what was beef and what was pork? And then like when the winters came in Philly, on the East Coast, what they thought about snow, and, if they were growing things, like did they know that they were going to have to like bring all of those buckets in for the winter, or do they just like say to themselves like, okay, like I guess my lime tree is gonna die because this thing called snow is coming and I don't know how to deal with it. So I don't know if you guys also in your quest to feed yourselves think about your parents and like how they adapted.
When I cook, I don't really know any of the recipes. I just try to cook to what I remember the taste being, and so a lot of times it comes out mushier than usually, but I usually can approximate the sauce a little bit. But it is a challenge, and it does bring me back to it in itself. It's almost like an art piece to try to approximate my own memories of what something tastes like and the feelings of sitting down with family. It's a unique thing to cook for yourself as a children of refugees. For me, at least, I feel very connected to cooking actually, and I'm terrible at cooking.
Like for me, having all that food in this house reminds me of in the early days, we weren't just the nuclear family. We had a lot of people in a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. At the most, we had 13 people in here, and that's kind of the family that I grew up with. Like my grandmother, grandfather, my parents, my 2 uncles, my mom's brothers, and the three of us, myself included, my great grandmother, great aunt, great uncle. I mean, we were all under the same roof, and in a suburban family home, tucked in Richmond somewhere, and we had to have that refrigerator. We had to have those 2 refrigerators and the freezer, because we had to feed everyone, and they couldn't go out to the grocery store all the time because they're working 12-hour days. So with this pandemic, it just kind of reminds me of those days when my grandparents were around, and we had that many mouths to feed. So yeah.
I think for me, I've been spending less time focusing on cooking, but what I've recently picked up is sewing, and I lost my grandmother in January. She sewed all of her own clothes up until she started hospice, right? Like she made her own pillows, she made her own clothes, she sewed her bed sheets so they fit perfectly to her bed. Like everything was very particular and meticulous, and I never understood, or I always wanted to learn how to sew, but never could sit down and actually do it. And I think for me, it's like realizing why my grandmother was sewing so much was because she had a really bad back. So like she was isolated since like 83 or 84 when she was in a bad car accident. She just stayed home all the time. And like, it's an easy thing to do when you're just like sitting at home. So I've been making like a bunch of doll toys and like catnip toys because it's just like easy to do. I'll put on a movie or that's my dog. Or like, you know, like I like chase the animals around, but like you can only do that for so long. And for me, like being able to reach back into like what my family did to survive, like my grandma sewed to like keep herself sane and like busy. And I'm really learning that. It's been like, I don't know, surreal.
Yeah, for me, like as far as like cooking, I'll miss that smell of like what my mom used to like do. Luckily, she lives like a couple of hours away, so I can call her and we'll meet halfway. But when I get it, you kind of reminisce about, again, like the days when you were like young and all these people were over. So, I mean, having that moment to kind of reflect is like really important when it comes to food. And, you know, like being Cambodian, like that's what we do. It's like there's all these different smells that you just like create these like wonderful memories, and sometimes you just miss that part, maybe not the food but just that memory of it. So you're like, hey mom, hook me up, you know, and we'll connect.
So we have 10 minutes left. And so before I call Rodney back, I'm gonna open it up to you guys if there's any questions you want to ask the other artists, or if there's any projects that you have coming up that you want to plug, or if there's anything that we didn't get to talk about that you really wanted to talk about, like now would be the time.
I actually wanted to say something to Aragna and Nguyen. I actually started out as an illustrator, and I fell in love with Jim Lee, Michael Turner, and comic books was one of my early inspirations for my work as well, along with Walt Disney's work in Steamboat Willie and animation. That's what I went to undergrad for originally, and then I switched over to textile arts. But Jim Lee and Michael Turner are still they still have a huge influence on my work to this day. But yeah, just thought it was really cool that you guys are into comic arts.
Yeah, Michael Turner passed away though, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and the other, this was like 5-6 months ago. Jim Lee was doing a book signing somewhere out in Pasadena, and I went and I actually saw him, and it was like, it's like meeting your hero.
Yeah.
It's like for me meeting like Rauschenberg, which I also met, was really cool, but I didn't. I was like, wow, that was like an amazing, yeah.
So I just want to say thanks to Catzie and all the team, Asian Arts Initiative, for putting this together, because I know, Catzie, you have gone through and losing your father and then getting married. All of this whole whirlwind in your life, and then being able to put on this show, and then the pandemic hit and everything. So I just want to say thank you for being resilient and bringing us all together.
You guys are fantastic.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
I'm just so sad that we didn't get to meet in person, because I feel like we'd have loads of fun, especially with Mooks. Mooks, somebody, I'm not gonna say who, called you the Hulk Hogan of Shade. So, so no, that would have been a really fun panel to have in person, but also, like to drink in person with you guys, in Philadelphia. But yeah, you all have been great as guests, roundtable, my talking conversationalist guests, but also, as the visual artist in this exhibition. So I thank you so much for all the work that you contributed, but also like all the work you continue to do in your own communities where you are. So, Rodney?
All right, real quick, we're going to take a quick group picture just to commemorate this historical event. Okay. I also just want to thank you guys. Listening to everything, I'm like, I want to chime in. I did have questions too. I was like, Filipinos have this thing. It's like, we learn to cook rice with this line.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Can someone tell my fiance?
I can't cook regular rice. I can cook sticky rice. I can't cook regular rice.
Oh.
There's also the knuckle trick too.
But people ask like, well, don't people have different fingers? I was like, no.
Yeah, they're all the same.
It's all gonna turn out really good. But yeah, hearing y'all talk was beautiful. I had such a great time. I almost feel like, yeah, we have to figure out some way of some sort of personal, if people are, I don't know when we'll all be able to not be socially distant again, but in the future, I want to make a point like, how do we bring folks together? Catzie, actually, I wanted to say something to you. I was like, I was remembering days in a Sangma Hall when I met you with my arts collective and my arts practice, and trying to figure out who I was as a revolutionary artist and shit. So I was appreciating all of these conversations and the different origin stories. I also met Jim Lee, and
cool.
I like how Nguyen's mouth just dropped open too.
But he was buff. I was like, yo.
Yeah, he's built. He's built.
Yeah, he's built, but short. I was like, I never met anyone shorter than me. But no, everything was just so healing. I wanted to say like it made me hungry. I'm hungry for more and more culture. I would be willing to trade lumpia secrets with for the longest time since the Khmer Kitchen closed down a long time ago. So folks, I want to share. But if there's anything that comes up, ideas, I think we're going till August 15th or 14th for the show. I'm also thinking like, how do we close this properly, right? So I don't know if we should we'll talk offline, Catzie, but if y'all are willing to do another piece of this journey, we can talk about that later.
Well, Rodney, why aren't you just part of the conversation? Why do you have to be on the sidelines?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
It's funny because
This is Cassie's doing.
No, it was
like,
him. When the first one, he was like, okay, I said my piece, I'm gonna go now, bye. And I was like, okay. And then we were like talking, and then at some point, like, it was like time to go, and I was like, oh, where's Rodney? Did he leave? And then he like, came back in. He was like, actually, I've been here the whole time.
Yeah, and I think the audience, I want to give you guys a shout out to. There's been like 50 people on the stream.
Ah,
There's
cool.
been, a pretty lively chatter in the boxes, especially on the food part. People are like, oh. So shout out to you guys. And yeah, stay tuned. I think I know in the next couple of weeks we're going to take a break, but y'all made me start making art again, inspiring me to pick up. I'm also more of a visual artist, but when I had to become performance artist, but I miss those days. So if those are gonna come back, I don't know. Like, I think there's time when we get out of this thing, everyone's gonna be hungry for more content and reaching for each other. And hopefully like in person or some way of making things happen in the future. I don't know what the future, I don't know what I'm saying, like 2021, 22. But I really enjoyed hearing you all talk. I think the audience will probably chime in too and say that it was just great for all you to share family histories. And I had double freezers growing up. It was like crazy.
It's so nice knowing that I'm not the only one.
But you know, keeping this alive, just revolutionaries gotta like feed each other. Much love. I don't know, we'll probably do a debrief survey at some point and then figure out the next steps, but feel free to reach out with anything, ideas that spark. And yeah, we'll keep you all posted. I don't know if Melissa, you want to chime in, or is there anything else we should close out with? But I will plug Asian Arts Initiative. We want to keep paying artists. So if you are able to donate to the page, and we want to keep something alive. And yeah, know that we're committed to always supporting the artists, especially these in these revolutionary times. So
Vietnam more reparations. Yeah, donate money. Yeah, please.
All right. That's all I got.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you,
Bye.
guys. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Night, everyone.
Good night.
Right.
Bye.